Mr. Chair, colleagues, I'd like to see if we could agree on items 9, 10, 11, and 12 as consent items, and then if we can move those items, we'll go to the special meeting with Plum and Budget and Finance.
So moved.
Okay. And do you accept with those?
Second.
Okay. So we move those items, and we just asked on item
You didn't do 8 too? No? 8?
8, there was a couple of questions.
Okay.
Yeah. On number 9, if we could just work with Office of Finance and find out we almost have a 90-day delay from the point of notification to the time it gets to Budget and Finance Committee. It's not a lot of money, but it costs us about $1,000 in interest because of that. We can find out what that may have been caused by. And then on number 12, if we can just add information to the committee report as to whether these are the initial contracts with LAWA and DWP, and whether, if they're not, have we been able to recover full cost recovery in the past, and then also whether CRA is also reimbursed contract administration for duties performed in their prior contract. So we can add that to the committee report. So we will recess the Budget and Finance Committee and start the joint meeting of the Budget and Finance Planning Land Use meeting. We have Mr. Reyes here as chair of Plum, and we have a quorum for Budget and Finance, and we'll go to item 1. Mr. Reyes, I'll ask the cards to come up, and then you can lead the discussion on that item. We have Mr. Jack Allen come up on item 1, Veronica Perez Becker, and Joe Calato.
Anybody? Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, Councilor Parks. It's good to be here with my colleagues, Councilor Rosendahl, Councilor Gruhl. As you know, we have been going through a process of trying to understand the value of time as it pertains to how the planning discipline is implemented here in the city. We were able to ask for a study that actually broke down what that value means and how it is identified throughout the planning department. And for decades, that whole function, I believe personally, was never really given its true merit in terms of its role in the city, its role in each district, and more importantly, how it impacts the quality of life in our city. So that being said, we wanted to make sure we capture that value, and we finally were able to do that, quantified it, and that would be the presentation that we'll be hearing from Director Gail Goldberg. But I also know that these are not the best of times to be looking at this type of a fee. It ranges from category to category. This is about first identifying what these costs are like, what other cities are doing, and with their feedback and through this hearing process, we wanted to get the reaction. And as policymakers, I believe here in this body, given all the work this very important committee does in Budget and Finance, we can start creating that balance of assessing what is it we need to do while being very attentive to how the market will react. So there are many different types of beneficiaries and also users of the planning department, but we also know that it is a critical element of an economic development engine for this city, if not for this region. And so understanding that balancing act is going to be crucial from here on out, but we need to start with a baseline set of figures and to be very clear as to what this value means, what the cost associated to that value, and hear from those who would interact with this city and also be impacted by these fees. So I thank you, Councilor Parks, for this opportunity. This is the first time I meet with this committee on a joint relationship, so look forward to seeing the outcome of this effort.
Thank you. Let me just make one announcement before we get started with the public comments. On item 7, which deals with the state budget update, I ask colleagues if we could just, because Ray is not here today, if we can just move that to the special meeting on June 8th, special meeting of the Budget and Finance, so we get that update at that time as to the statewide impacts, so we can get as full of evaluation on that as possible. Ms. Gruhl, you were right on item 8. If we ask for consent on that one, and I just like, it's the same issue as we had on the other one, if we can find out as to why there was such a 12-month delay in recovering these fees with the interest and things of that nature. So we can move item 8 consent also.
So moved.
Okay? All right. Thank you.
Good afternoon, council members. Veronica Perez, Veteran with the Central City Association. I'm also here today on behalf of the LA Chamber and VICA. Although we understand the city's budget crisis and the need to increase revenue, we have strong concerns about the currently proposed filing fee increases. During the current economic crisis, we must be doing all we can to ensure that development projects, which provide a vital source of income to the city's coffers, keep moving forward. Instead, we believe that these increases of up to 1,000% in some cases could result in a decrease in projects and city revenue. The increases in fees will also make it more difficult to build affordable housing. For example, in affordable housing projects, the fees for certain density bonuses could increase from $4,500 to over $23,000. We're not asking that there be no fee increases. We just think that there's a better balance that can be struck, and that more time should be taken to properly vet this with the impacted stakeholders to see what that balance is. We also support creating an enterprise fund so that these fees can be properly directed to the right department. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Jack Allen, President of the Palisades Preservation Association, and also a member of the Community Council, but I'm not speaking on their behalf because we never had a chance to agendize this and discuss it. In principle, we agree that applicants should pay the costs of processing their applications. But there are a number of cases where the costs that are now being proposed would be unfair and unjust, particularly when much of the cost is caused by an excessive amount of bureaucracy as a result of the large size of the city government and the size of the city itself, which requires the planning staff to make very time-consuming trips as part of the processing of an application. Those costs are in part due to the city's decision to centralize many of its functions. In some cases, the proposed increases are outrageous as well as excessive. And I'll give you an example. Take a relief from the fence height limitation. That you can do that without a hearing. And presently it costs you, it says in here, $394. But the costs are $1,000 as some of my think. If the proposal would be $4,525 plus $136 general plan surcharge plus $45 historic overlay for a total of $4,706. That for less than an hour of work, because these are just zoning administrator, you just fit these out when they're not no public hearing and no opposition. That's about $5,000 an hour. It's ludicrous. Another way that it's unjust is if you decide.
Mr. Allen, could you wrap up your comments?
Okay.
Over your time.
There are several cases here. This is really penalizing homeowners who are not going to get the benefit that out of this that this says that they're supposed to get, and it doesn't meet the profit-making objective. I get a number about 6 in here that are really bad and really need to be reduced down, especially the appeal from a building department decision, particularly when the homeowner is in compliance, but has to go through a $6,000 fee to appeal that after already going through a $350 appeal with the building department. All because it's bureaucracy built into it.
Okay, thank you very much. The representative from the Building Industry Association, are they still here? Is that Joe? I butchered your last name so bad you didn't know it was you.
Good afternoon. My name is Joe Catalogo, and I'm with the Building Industry Association. The BIA has long been in discussions with planning to achieve full cost recovery for the planning and land use services provided by the city. We've also been supportive of efforts to establish an enterprise fund so fees associated with planning and land use services stay within the planning department. One minor concern that we have is that this hasn't been properly vetted yet, but we are meeting with someone from the planning department tomorrow with our government affairs team, so we appreciate that. And we just want to say it's imperative to establish a full cost recovery enterprise fund based on an efficient and effective process for land use and planning, such as was the case with the Streamline 12-2 initiative. So we ask that the budget and pub committees require full implementation of the goals desired under the 12-2 initiatives as it looks to establish full cost recovery.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We have the staff come up. And also, while they're coming up, Mr. Luther, would you explain what the CAO's concerns are about the term enterprise fund versus special fund?
Yes,
I think we're trying to get to the same place, but we may be using the wrong terminology.
yes. I had discussed this issue with Ray Serrano, the CAO, and his concern is that just the nature of the activity itself does not lend itself to being an enterprise fund. He'd like an opportunity to review that recommendation in tandem with the Controller's Office, who also expressed some concerns about that as well. And if the intent is to segregate the revenues, what Mr. Serrano suggests is establishing a special revenue fund in the next year's budget, which would accomplish a lot of, I think, of what you want to do is really to kind of segregate those revenues and have special accounting of those expenditures and revenues from that fund. But I do need to hear today specifically why the recommendation for an enterprise fund, and perhaps there's other issues that we should consider as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chairman Reyes and Chairman Parks and members of the Joint Committee. I'm Gail Goldberg, your Planning Director, and we're here today to present the results of our fee study and the recommendations of the Department for our new fee structure. With me at the table are Eva Juan McDaniels, our Deputy Director, Michael Legrand, our Chief Zoning Administrator, and from Matrix Consulting Group, Nicole Kissam, who has done much of the work. As outlined in our report, this is the result of a 2-year effort, a 2-year process to first get funding for the study, get the RFP out, select a contractor, execute the contract, conduct the study, and the department-wide review, and with the intent of achieving full cost recovery or near full cost recovery. With our consultants, we approach the study to meet government code standards and to follow best management practices to ensure that the fees are fair, equitable, and represent the estimated and reasonable cost of services. The analysis undertaken to identify the cost included summarizing the list of all planning fees, interviewing key managers and employees on processes and improvements, and completing time estimates for each fee item. The information was then calculated to achieve the full cost of each fee item to include both direct and indirect costs. So the fees that you see represent the real cost of doing the process. It's as simple as that. In some cases, we are recommending that fees be reduced based on this analysis, but please understand that when we talk about reducing a fee, we are talking about subsidizing it with general fund money.
Let me ask you before you go any further.
Sure.
That's what I didn't understand. When you say subsidize, are you saying that the local council office finds the funds to subsidize? Or are you
No.
saying you absorb it in your department?
It becomes a part of the department's budget. Right now, we believe that fees only cover about 40% of the actual processing of applications, and the general fund subsidizes the additional 60%. The reality is it costs what it costs. You know, it takes a certain amount of time, that's it. We certainly are working and have worked on improving the process, and we will continue to work on improving the process.
Just in that context.
Sure.
Could you just react to Jack Allen's point that he was making? I saw your head bobbing over there.
Yeah. Well, when Jack was talking about a particular process taking only an hour, I can assure you that the analysis that was done, the consulting firm didn't look at just going through that process once. It looked at a number of times and averaged what it actually cost. And one of the things I think that people forget here is that because we are such a large city, and because our ordinances are complicated by the fact that we have a large city, many of the processes are much more complicated than small cities would have. And so to process and to actually achieve the objectives of an ordinance takes longer than it would take at another city. It does not necessarily mean that we are less efficient. It simply means that we have a more complicated process because we have a large and more complicated city.
Were we able to quantify the volume?
We did do averages, and we based our projections in terms of revenue for the upcoming year. We based them on last year because it was a lower volume year. But we do have reasonably accurate data on the amount of the case for each kind of case.
Can you just take one snapshot of one function that might provide some insight as to the volume of what we're dealing with? Is there any one process that you could, just a snapshot of one function or one activity?
If you could maybe pick one out, and then let me just quickly, I'm almost finished with the overview, and when I get finished, perhaps, one of the ones that might be interesting to look at, what about the density bonuses? You know, one of the ones that I think it generates some interest are density bonuses. And that has turned out to be, you know, a more complicated process in this city, and perhaps we could look at that one. But in any case, I wanted to talk to you about, we not only have put out for you all of the processes within the department and the actual cost of going through that process, we have also made some recommendations in terms of subsidizing certain fees because they have more of a community benefit. However, we are also talking about recommending a couple of surcharges. One of the surcharges that we are recommending is a surcharge that is allowed by state law and used by almost every city I know, and it is a general plan maintenance fee, because developers benefit from having accurate and up-to-date community plans and general plans. So most cities have some small surcharge that does not, by the way, cover the full cost of doing your general plan updates or your community plans, but it is a contribution toward them, and we are recommending a 3% surcharge for general plan maintenance that would also help community plans. We are also recommending an historic resources survey fee of 1% on all entitlement applications and building permits just for, I think, the remaining, I think it's 3 remaining years of the city survey LA, because as you know, each year we have to come up with a big chunk of money to match the Getty grant that we have, and we think that that would be helpful. So we are, and that particular one would sunset after June 30th, 2012, when the survey is completed. But we also, as I mentioned before, after we got the final analysis from Matrix, we conducted a review of every fee to determine which ones might qualify for a subsidy from the general fund. And for this review, we recommended subsidizing applications for some single-family dwelling applications, some various historic resources applications, such as the Mills Act. So we did look and try to make some recommendations to help alleviate the added burden of the fees. And we, as I indicated early on, did recommend an enterprise fund. I would certainly be happy to have the discussion. The concern that the department has, and this is a concern because I've spent a lot of time with the development community. The development community and I want to say generally, I can't speak for all of them, understand that there is an obligation on their part to pay for the services that they are getting in terms of applications, but they want to make certain, and frankly, I want to make certain, that the funds that are collected for those services are segregated and protected for those services, so that the planning department will always have the opportunity to have adequate staff commensurate with the fees that are coming in. We fully understand that we have the obligation of increasing staff in good times and decreasing staff in bad times, but we need to be certain that we are not charging developers for the full cost of a service that we then cannot provide because we don't have adequate staff, even when there is adequate revenue. So that is our concern, and we need assurances, and we're happy to talk about it, but I have to tell you that I have given assurances to the development community that if they pay for a service, we will provide the service, and we will provide it in a timely way. Much of the complaint about the planning department over the past numerous years in terms of processing applications is simply that we have never had adequate staff to do it appropriately. And
Getting in this
yeah.
40%, 60% status, why wasn't it just full cost recovery all along? What happened?
Well, it's sort of interesting because I hear people talking about it being a bit outrageous, the new fee, and what I think is really outrageous is the old fee. And the fact that over the years we continued to subsidize with general fund money, development applications that benefit the development. And so, from my perspective, it was just something that over the years we had gotten to the habit of. I don't think we had done a full fee study. That took a motion by all of you and setting aside a lot of money to do that. And so it's a starting point. And frankly, for those who are concerned about the fact that maybe we're too bureaucratic, this is a major effort in the department to streamline. We're reorganizing geographically. We will assess these on a regular basis. We're not going to just set fees. We will look at them after a couple of years. And the reality is that legally we're not allowed to collect more fees than it takes to actually do the service. And this fee study resulted in our actually reducing about 13 fees because the study resulted in an outcome that showed that we were collecting more than it took to do the service.
Just in terms of other cities, how do we compare with other cities when it comes to the fee structure?
Yes, well, our fee structure right now looks really good compared to other cities, and the new fee structure, if we adopt the recommendations that we have made to you, will put us a little bit higher than the cities around us, but not all of them. I think Burbank is still a little higher, maybe Pasadena or Santa Clarita, but it does put us a little higher. But I would make the case that we have a big, complex city, and when we create an ordinance, it is much more complicated. And for instance, even the density bonus. If you are creating enabling legislation in Santa Clarita, I assure you, the ordinance is much simpler than it is in a city the size of Los Angeles. So our processes are more complex because they have to account for a big, diverse city. And so, our fees are going to be a little bit higher.
Thank you.
Let me just ask for the fees, and this is probably my biggest concern, and maybe the CAO can jump on in this, is that when we get the breakdown of salary, fringe benefits, and operating expense, we're roughly showing about a $47 million take. But then when we add the citywide overhead, we jump to 59 million. And this is our same old question about cap rate and things of that nature. We're talking about adding $12.5 million to overall fees that does not primarily put planning and people on the ground. It's paying for another group of services of what I'm assuming, if we need, at some point, if they need a city attorney, that's paid for,
Right.
CLA staff, CAO staff, not by name, but by function. And that 21% is what, in my judgment, may be driving the fees greater, and whether we've looked at a more precise, I know we have something coming back about
Right.
how we look at those overheads. I agree, if we have bond fund and it's coming from the federal government, we should get every penny for citywide overhead cost and all that other. But when we're dealing with issues of fees or services from within departments and working with each other, it seems like we are, in many instances, going at cross purposes to create a 21% increase of a fee to pay for citywide overhead. That's an issue we've been struggling with for now a couple of years.
Yes, and I would concur with exactly what you said, that we are working on a study to look at that specific part of it. We expect that study to be done probably within the next 3 months. But it will look at, whereas the first study looked at grants and the cap rates, this will look at the use of cap rates for all other applications. There'll be a new city controller also in July, and I know she's expressed interest in looking at this issue too. As far as the methodology used in the report, I would say that it was done precisely according to what we would like to see at the moment, which is, here are your cap rates. This is the fee that you would charge if your intent is to recover 100% of your costs, but there are exceptions, and these are the exceptions that we would recommend. And they've laid it out that way, and I think that's probably appropriate for the discussion today.
But let me ask, so I understand it, when we say they've basically retained their costs, if I understand it, their costs are within the 71% for salary fringes and the 8% for operating expenses. If I understand the citywide overhead, that's costs that we're adding because we are absorbing other entities that might assist them.
Barring any change to our current practices, though, they are following exactly.
Follow what's there.
Yeah.
But that's why we keep bringing it up, because there's a concern about what's there, because I think we'd have a significantly different cost factor if they stayed within what the operational cost in their department was, and that we were not adding 21% for this nebulous citywide cost. I think that's the give and take, and whether their fees dropped, wouldn't say down to zero in the sense of the 21%, but if you didn't have to add that, then we'd have to determine what are we losing if you don't add it. Because I don't know how often Ms. Goldberg calls the city attorney for this or for the CLA for that, and we are kind of involving that into that 21%. So we're going to struggle with this.
Yes.
If the fees that we're projecting right now reflect the current practice for fees throughout the city, would it be the case that if a change were made in the next, say, 6 months, that all fees would be adjusted to any new cap that was established?
I would say our study is, we hopefully will have it in 3 months. The actual implementation of any changes, I think, will take much longer, because the only impact that you're going to have by reducing the overheads is reduce essentially general fund revenue. And that's going to be a tough issue to address maybe this next fiscal year.
Yeah. I think what we're trying to balance is that in looking at these fees, again, I think the controller's report is right on, if you're going to get every penny. But again, from my perspective, it doesn't take into account, I think it's a significant difference between us charging each other or the city creating a fee, as opposed to us going to the federal government and saying, give me a grant, and I'm going to get every dime that I have coming to me. And again, this 12% or this 21%, we clearly realize is general fund money. It goes in to our reserve fund, and we have an expectation of using it. The issue is, I think when we look at these department by department, how fair are the fees, and are they reasonable, even though we know they impact positively on the general fund? That's the 21% issue. There's no doubt the 71% and the 8% are things that you physically are putting things on the ground. You have planners, you have work being done, if reports being done, those figures are not in question. It's that citywide addition. That's where I think we clearly have to look at it.
Nicole, did you want to take one of the fees and talk a little about the volume? And
Sure, if you'd like me to.
I think this is in response to,
The question.
yes, to Chairman Reyes' question.
Big picture level, the results that you see in the report were comprised from 7 analytical models. So we split the department up into their individual functions, and then we interviewed them and did a workload analysis using PCTS data and then also their time estimates in order to create a basis for allocating costs. So what you see when you see the recommendations in the report is a compilation of 8 models. So if a case is primarily processed in CPB, for example, you may also have Community Planning Bureau, you may also have zoning administration costs, which is a separate function, as well as public counter costs associated with the intake and processing of that. So the more hands that touch it, obviously the more people hours that are going to work on it, and hence the more costs associated. So per Gail's recommendation, if we want to look at the density bonus area, this is a good example where more than one function is going to touch the application. It's actually very distilled. Most of the hours and costs are incurred in the Community Planning Bureau, followed by an amount for the public counter to intake and process that application. And the reason we use some type of workload data is to make sure that we achieve 100% allocation of resources, not more than and not less than. That's what makes it a defensible analysis. We don't structure a fee to make a profit or significantly under-recover. Does that help?
Yes, but how about in terms of numbers? I mean, this is a city of over 3 million.
Right.
And what I think policymakers, we should have the perspective of how many cases a day, a week, a month. The volume is critical.
So we looked at the number of cases per year by fee item to the best of our ability from your PCTS permitting system.
And is there a ballpark figure?
There is. I didn't put the total in here. Is it there?
Councilman Eva Yuan McDaniel, if you, I don't know if you have the report with you, but in the report, one of the appendices has a long sheet, and where the study is based on 0708 volume, which is 6,416
There you go, yeah.
total. And we break it out by the case type also.
6,400.
See the detail, yeah. And also indicates how much the actual cost is, how much the city is collecting based on the number, and the gap.
Right.
That's how we derive the 11 million gap.
Well, my bias is pretty clear. I used to work in the planning department. I'm trained as a planner, and I think many folks don't understand the discipline. It's very easy not to see how each component fits to actually implement the visions that every councilman has for their district, and how those policies impact the city as a whole. So that, I just wanted to get a snapshot of that volume. And I do have a question regarding, we've been getting emails and letters and folks concerned. In one area, in regards to affordable housing, we get a whole range of different type of stakeholders who go after federal funds, state funds, CRA funds. There's a whole range of funding sources that is available to supplement affordable housing. And now affordable housing, we're talking about reaching the middle class on down. When these subsidies, when these fees were put into place, what was the thought process, knowing that we've got this high level of government funding that essentially is going back into the city coffers, and we're the ones applying for the funds?
Well, that was an interesting discussion in the planning department. As you know, we looked at what are the kinds of things that maybe we should be subsidizing the fee for, because it had a greater community benefit, and sometimes the community benefit was greater than the individual applicant benefit. And so those are the kinds of things that we looked at. But when we looked at the density bonus, frankly, there are two fees we set for density bonus. One was for the on-menu density bonus. That's a simpler process. And frankly, it's the kind of incentives for affordable housing that have less impact on a community. And so these are the ones we want to encourage people to use. The on-menu, it's simpler, and the fee, the cost of doing those applications is around $7,000. But if someone wants to do an off-menu, these are the things that have more of a community impact, their height, their things that, and these are the things where we have put in a longer process and a more public hearing process. So it involves having to go to the Planning Commission because these are things that the community is very engaged in. And so that process costs $23,000 to go through that. But the reality is, in each case, these density bonuses can be used by a market rate developer or by a nonprofit affordable housing developer. But in each case, whether it's a nonprofit or it's a market rate, they are getting a real benefit, a development capacity benefit that has significant value to the development, whether it is a nonprofit or whether it's a market rate. They are getting added density, they're getting added height. This is a real value in either way. But frankly, if the Joint Committee or the City Council sees some fees here that they believe as a policy should be supplemented by the general fund, we're happy to look at that. These are sort of policy calls. But from my perspective, sort of personally, I saw that whether you're a nonprofit or you're a market rate, you are getting a significant real value from that density bonus that I think is more than offset, and the cost of the process, even at $23,000, is insignificant to the value of added height, added density, or those kinds of things.
In these categories, you have roughly 13 reduced fees.
Mm-hmm.
We've got about 7 categories that were deleted,
Mm-hmm.
about 22 new ones.
Mm-hmm.
So they kind of balance out there. But the question is, when we look at comments made during public comment, the impact on the single residency, the Joe citizen, the
Right.
folk who are coming here in high numbers to the counter. When you look at these reductions, the deletions, and the new fees, what is the harsh reality for them? Are they feeling the brunt of the new fees? Are they
Well,
getting, what's their experience going to be
I
like?
think that when we looked at what should be subsidized, we did look at single-family houses, and we looked at the relative benefit of what they were getting and the fee, even if the process is long, what's the benefit that they're getting as a single-family house as opposed to a developer who's doing multiple units. And so we did propose subsidizing a number of single-family house fees. We suggested subsidies on a lot of the, not a lot of, but some of the historic applications for Mills Act. We're subsidizing some of that. The sign-offs for historic preservation plans when we are doing compatibility checkoffs and things of that sort that we believe benefit the full community more than they benefit the individual property owner. We suggested subsidizing those. So I think that we were sensitive to what we sometimes think of as the little guy and a developer who is actually doing a for-profit development.
Okay. Now, this started 2 years ago, so it's not like we're reacting to the announcement a few months back that we're $500 million in the hole and maybe $1 billion next year if things don't change. So it's not like this was done overnight. So I'm going to just say that for the record, because folks will say, here you are pounding away on the private sector with fees at a time when everyone's bracing themselves companies are trying to stay afloat, banks are closing, and here you are laying this fiscal hammer on us, and it could be for many the last nail in the coffin.
I would make the argument to the entire development community that if they are relying on a process, application process, that needs a 60% subsidy from the general fund, the quality of that service and the time that it takes to process those applications is going to be significantly less, significantly more timely in the next year when we simply do not have the general fund dollars. Across the board, we are reducing the general fund money to every department. And in my department, if we cannot, for the development community, secure the service that they need, they are going to be a victim of the general fund dilemma and disaster that we are having in this city as much as anyone else. I think in many ways, this is the only way that the development community can secure the service that they need in order to really create the development that they need to do in this city.
And just one more comment. You stated that you've had conversations with the stakeholders in going over this fee structure, am I correct?
Well, I have had discussions for 2 years with the development community. From the day I got here, I have talked about the fact that we are over-subsidizing the application process. And what happens when you do that with general fund money is that you are subject to the ups and downs of the general fund. And as a result of that, this department has never, ever had adequate staffing to actually provide the service that people are paying for, even if they're paying at a very reduced rate. We simply haven't had the staff. And so I have made the argument with the development community that in order to secure and guarantee adequate staff to do the work that they need done, we need to have fees that are closer to fully cost recovery, and we have to protect those fees in a way to make certain that those fees are used to provide the staff that's necessary. I shared these fees. I meet on a monthly basis with the BIA, and I did share them with them. We are happy to share them more with people. I think when we were first doing this, we had assumed that we would take more time right now to sort of vet the fees with the development community. But the reality is that we didn't expect to be in this position, and with the reduced general fund money that every department has. So I think there is a little more of an urgency for us to get the fees in place. Right now, our budget right now includes about $6 million of these fees in our budget. So, frankly, we're not going to be able to take 6 months and
No, I'm not
have
suggesting
lengthy
that at all.
discussion.
I guess, Councilor Parks, that I was going to suggest that, I'm not sure if time allows because of these urgencies, but if we continue this 1 week and either send it straight to council or have it stay here as a joint committee so that folks who are saying they just got it have a chance to review and perhaps of all the increases that have been identified, maybe look at the top 5 or top 10 that are most controversial and see if we need to make adjustments. Maybe we don't.
Yeah.
But I think the gut check's going to be in 6 months to a year when we see the reaction from the market on how this city performs when it comes to the built-out environment and the use of our police powers as we implement and manage our land use decisions.
And let me share with you that we did, about 3 weeks ago, send out the report to everyone who had expressed interest or that we could think of in terms of business organizations to get it out to as many people as possible. And I do believe that the development community, for the most part, I don't want to say totally, but for the most part, understands.
But I'm also interested in the neighborhood councils, in the historic preservation, the stakeholders, the nonprofit development sector, and as much as a for-profit, just to get their feedback. It would be a shame if we move so quickly that we end up lowering our business activity and not addressing the necessary physical changes that need to occur in our respective districts when we try to deal with the pressures of the city. And so that's just my hesitation there.
Let me just ask Mr. Luther, when do you think the CAO is going to have that report back as it relates to enterprise fund versus special fund? Is that something?
We could have that report back done relatively quickly, but it doesn't affect implementation of new fees, and we probably couldn't implement it anyway until the next fiscal year. You wouldn't want to do that.
I just wondered, because two of their recommendations are tied together,
Yeah.
implement the fees and then create the enterprise fund. And I just want to get an idea
Yeah.
of whether it's called a special fund or whatever we end up calling it.
We would just basically recommend that on recommendation 2 that the CAO report back in, say, 60 days.
Because I think and I think we pushed Ms. Goldberg on this for months now, that if we're going to go through this fee change, and it's going to be part of the ongoing budget, if we do not have a special fund in place, then next year we're right in the same boat, that we're saying cut 30%, and the money's not there. So, and we know how hard it is to get out of the general fund once it gets in there, because these other things are competing. So I would not want to put them in a position to create these fees and then not have some assurance that we're going to have some form of a fund, because, we said at Budget and Finance, and we're all somewhat surprised that with all the things going on, our general plans were in jeopardy. We're somewhat concerned that zoning was in jeopardy. All these things that we had kind of put in place for the last 2-3 years, saying we're going to fund, 12 community plans a year. Those things, if we don't do them, then I think the dilemma, and I was going to ask Mr. Goldberg a question, if we don't go forward on our community plans as intended, doesn't that create even more work for you as people are asking for exemptions and the variances?
It absolutely does. Having real community plans in place that guide development with clear zoning, with overlays, makes it so much simpler and will make our case processing. It will reduce the number of cases, and it will reduce the processing time.
And I believe, Councilmembers, the exacerbation of this uneven playing field that exists in the city, the areas that have not received their focus on community plans, especially in South LA, South Central, East, and Northeast, their community plans are way behind other parts of the city. So even as we started gaining traction, making movement in these past few years, this comes in as a giant wall that just shuts everything down and further exacerbates the conditions of that part of town.
Okay, I have a lot of questions, but it may be that we're coming back. So I guess the
Let me just ask you one thing. One of the things I was wondering about is whether, because this is something I think every council member is going to have some issues about, is whether we ask all of our questions today and bring this to council so that it can be a full hearing at council. Because no matter what we do as a committee or a joint committee,
right, we're still going to have this full
everybody's
discussion.
going to have some of the same questions about the cost, how it affects them, nonprofits versus for-profit.
Yeah, the worst thing happens, we bring it back to committee for
Yeah,
adjustments.
but I think we get everybody's input
Good.
ahead of time.
I'm for that.
Then we're not guessing, so we can bring it to council.
So I'll just throw out a
Yeah.
few questions. Number one question is, in the budget and the projections of our budget, did we incorporate an increase in fees?
Yes.
To this extent?
Yes, the mayor had estimated about $8 million in new revenues, which is consistent with the report. They had taken a 6-month estimate because it takes a while to implement the fees, so they had reduced it to $4 million. That as the budget moved its way through council, they moved it from a 6-month implementation to a 9-month and increased the revenues to $6 million. So $6 million is in the budget.
I knew we had something, I just didn't know the extent of that.
Yeah,
And does that
it's
include?
$6 million, and in order to achieve that revenue level, we would need to have this in place probably by September at the latest. Yeah.
Let me ask you
Yes.
on the ordinance, what is the timeline for ordinances to make this 9-month issue?
For once, I can say that we've gotten the ordinance out. It was released last week. Our planning attorneys worked with
the Director of Planning in the department so that we've prepared it, and it's already to the clerk. I think it's just waiting to be agendized for committee or council.
It would then require, if there's
released Friday.
discussion about altering individual fees, it would just
Correct.
require some alteration. of-
If there were changes that the council
And then
so instructs,
60
yes.
days upon the council approving it.
Correct. Now, as to...
Your name, Pete, for the record.
I'm sorry, Pete Echeverria from the City Attorney's Office. Now, as to there being a special fund, or what I would refer to as a trust fund, that we can address relatively quickly and assist the CAO in doing that and make a recommendation to you.
My only comment on that is I haven't talked to the controller staff, but I don't know. I think we had always anticipated it would be done for the 10-11 budget. If Mr. Parks is asking, can it be done for the 9-10 budget, I would have to check with other people just to see if that's even
Right.
technically
Of course.
possible.
See, I think that's why we pushed so hard to get this money there, and I think Ms. Goldberg came in this job, and she found out immediately we hadn't done planning for a number of years, and so we gave her the task of figuring out what to do, and I would hate to have the fees raised and not have a somewhat of ability to catch those fees, whatever we call it, so that she is looking towards next year, that if our budget goes down, that we're not saying to her, take a 40% hit, and then the development community is in that fix. So we'd like this to go hand in hand, whatever we call it.
Okay. So I think...
Okay.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, just a couple of things that jumped out at me. One was certified farmers market, which we're trying to, the certified farmers market that went from, and the both of those, and the one before that, the relief from fence height limitation and the service of alcohol in a small district. It seems like they went up a huge amount. And I'm not sure exactly, again, that we should look at those categories. We've been very much encouraging farmers markets in the neighborhood and so forth. We're going to be now charging them fees to, no waiving of the fees, different things like that. So that would be a question. And I can, if Mr. Parks, if you want me to, I'll just throw these out, and something that I think will be asked, and maybe even before it goes to council, you can kind of outline those. Similarly, in encouraging businesses to service of alcohol in a small business. The coastal development, that's when I didn't understand where we're actually subsidizing that and reducing that, which was also below. That didn't make sense to me.
Attachment A.
Yeah, we're on attachment A. That's page 2 of 6.
Is that we're subsidizing single family? And then the other one, when we actually did the study, we found that we were already charging more than the cost of the work. So that's why the second one was
And so you're
reduced.
saying in the subsidy where you have 50% subsidy, that is for single family. That's where
Because
you've
it's
made policy
yes.
on the single family. Okay. I saw on, hold on a second in my notes here, the development agreement application went from $4,000 to almost $30,000.
Yes. It is an enormous amount of work to do a development agreement. And there is a huge benefit, a huge financial benefit to a developer to get a development agreement and to lock into place all of the rules and regulations that are in place when they get their development agreement, and they can be extremely complicated.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the mountain fire districts, it looks like you just did a much, that again was a larger increase. That would be questioned, those of us that represent mountain fires. And the other is on your condo conversion, because we had a lot of discussion about condo conversion. This is not brand new condos going up. This is just converting existing apartments into condos. Okay. The HPOZ preservation plan. Now, if you're a community, I'll take just Stonehurst, for example, and you are applying to be an HPOZ, this is not a wealthy part of the, they're applying to be that. Who pays for that when it is not one person for their own household?
Can I invite Ken to come up? Oh, did Ken? Janet?
So it says it's not.
Because
part
they
of
were
the-
part of
Okay.
this discussion.
Okay. So that would be a question that
Yes.
we would want asked at council as well. I know it says standalone application not as part of an establishment change or removal. So that, I wasn't quite sure. The mobile home park impact, again, I don't know if that's not for an individual mobile home or that's for a brand-new park. It went from 2,400 to 13,000.
We'll have to come back to you with
And then
the
the other large one, and I'm not sure, modifications, discontinuance of use, these are revocations. These are
Yes.
when people have not followed the rules. Is
Right.
that kind of, for lack of a better term?
Yes, using our police powers to revoke that land use.
Okay. And just, I know it was discussed on the, your 3% general maintenance fee, that will go for any project in the city?
No,
And
the
1%.
general plan maintenance
Oh, general
fee,
plan.
yeah, it's
For general
just, it would cover part of the cost of the community plans or any updates that we were doing to the general plan.
And you're also coming back on the affordable housing project issue that I know was discussed, because
Yes.
there was lots of email traffic about that.
Right, and we're more than happy to have that discussion as a policy discussion. The subsidies are really a policy discussion.
Because as we're trying to develop things and increase. And then my last one was on LEED projects. I know, now they're not on here necessarily, but we've encouraged people to get LEED certification.
Oh, yeah.
And I've heard complaints recently, I don't know if it's real or not, but that the LEED projects that are supposed to be expedited are not being expedited necessarily because you may not have the staff or whatever, but I don't know how LEED certified fits into any of these categories as well.
Look at page 2, you'll see a little,
On the attachment,
yeah, greening building program.
Councilwoman,
reduced, yeah, just for 115.
Councilwoman Eva Yuan McDaniel, I just want to indicate to you that the department is facing severe staffing shortage, not only in regular case processing, but also in expedite. Because of the funding shortage, our expedite has been trimmed down from 27 funded positions down to 12 in 09-10. So anything that needs to be expedited will be impacted.
But don't they pay more to expedite?
Yeah, I think what you're clarifying is the ordinance requires that the department expedite, small e, not capital E like our expedited processing section, expedite green building applications that meet a certain threshold. And so basically what we do is we give those cases a priority over a case that isn't a sustainable building. And so that's where you may have heard some complaints that people don't feel like we're maybe going as fast as they anticipated we would be able to go, having that case. And again, part of that is staffing issues and retirements we've had from some employees, as well as not having the ability to fill vacancies that we have. But they are getting priority to those cases that are LEED certified. It's just the level of priority that they would want compared to what we can currently deliver. There's probably a gap, and that's where you're hearing the complaints that we're not delivering on expediting like the ordinance calls for LEED certified buildings.
And let me just remind everybody again, we had 400 positions in the budget last year. We have had 100 vacancies for over a year. So 1/4 of our staffing is vacant.
And on the expediting, the biggie,
Yes.
if you do pay for that expediting?
Yes, we'll deliver.
That still
That
exists?
still exists. We're doing it for multiple types of cases, commission cases that are plan approval, plan amendments, zone changes are eligible to go through there. Conditional use permits as well for small businesses, for example. Affordable housing projects always had a priority in that unit, regardless of the types of entitlements they may need. So we're pretty much availing ourselves of almost all applications to go to our expedited processing section that's fully cost recoverable.
It is fully cost recoverable?
Yes.
So if it's fully cost recoverable, how do those projects fare in these changes? If they're,
They still would pay their initial filing fees, as well as they put a deposit on for the staff time that is created to expedite those cases. So those fees would also go up, the base fee that they still pay, even though they're paying a premium for expedited service.
And let me remind everybody that expedite in this city, what it means to expedite is we have adequate staff to actually process the application. That's what you buy with expedite, that we have a staff person to work on it. We can only take into expedite the number of cases that the available staff can do. So we now are taking in half the cases that we used to. So that's
But
Just the
if
way-
someone came in, and I'm sorry, this is kind of philosophical a little bit, if we said, there were a number of people who said, look, we really want to have it expedited, if you have a guarantee of X amount a month, we guarantee, they're going to come in and pay for that staff time.
Right.
Wouldn't we, as budget and planning, say, okay, if they're going to fully pay for those staff, then you get an exception to the hiring freeze because you're fully reimbursing?
One might have assumed that, but that's not how it played out over the past 2 years at all.
I think that's something that we
Yeah.
should look at,
Yeah.
because if I'm a developer right now and I've paid an expediting fee and it still is the same.
Well, except that right now, we won't even take it in as an expedite if we don't have the staff to do it. And what you have to do with expedite, the thing that distinguishes expedite from the rest of your process is that you have to be able to legally show that you can do the work in your expedited unit significantly less time than if it were in your regular process. And right now, just having the staff to do it in a normal, process is much faster than in the rest of our city.
Well, the whole idea of
Yeah.
expediting was, if I'm a person going in normally and not paying expediting, I wouldn't be at a loss because someone else has paid expediting and get ahead of me. It was supposed to be kind of two equal paths, so
And they
to
are.
speak.
Right.
And so that would be something that you want to say to people, well, yeah, they're actually paying an expediting fee, but it's also now cutting your time that you would have because of we don't have any more staff. So.
And it actually would make the person who did not pay the premium fee, their case would go faster, because those cases that we do in expedite would be moved over to a special section that just works on those cases. So my planner who's doing regular subdivisions, for example, wouldn't have the burden of having those extra 20 cases a month on his desk because they're in a different section, different staff working on it. They are totally separate, so that you're not just taking somebody and putting them on the top of a pile, but you're actually taking that work away and moving it to a different section.
The other thing that I think is important to note is that if we have fees that actually create enough money to have adequate staff to do all of the cases, and that's the intention of this, then what you will be getting in your regular process in the city of LA is what you are now paying for in expedite. That's the time frame you should be getting, because it's exactly the same. It's simply having adequate staff to do it. Our expediting section then would be challenged to go beyond the normal processing time and create a really expedited process that I think would be very appealing, not to everybody. Right now, everybody wants it. But the new process would make expediting very attractive for certain projects.
Let me just ask a couple of questions before I run out. One thing, and when we get it to council, I ask Wendy whether we can get this scheduled maybe where it's a light calendar, and we can get it brought in to where we can have a full discussion.
Because this is the first public hearing, right, that it's been held.
Right. So the issue is, one of the things I was wondering, have we considered anything like we do with DWP, with a lifeline, with seniors and things in which we give people a different rate? And that's something I think would be helpful. The other issue is, as we look at these fees and the significant increase in some of them, does that drive people into building and addressing issues without getting a permit, to where now we have more ad hoc and illegal structures that are going on? The other issue is, when I look at the fees for condo conversion, when we add that to the fees of the cost of moving a tenant, basically we're saying there'll never be a condo conversion. I mean, because the fees are like $17,000 per tenant, and then you're going to add $20,000 per conversion. I think we're basically, if those fees remain, we're saying there's no more condo conversion in the city of LA, because I just don't know how anybody would have a building that they could pencil in something like 30-some thousand a unit if they're going to move the tenant and then go to conversion. So I think we have to look at that and see if that's what our plan is, to say we're not going to do that as a city, then we should just say there's a prohibition and just not cost them out of it. And so the other issue, and again, I'm going to ask if we can get Ray to get us a much quicker response on the special fund.
Right. It'll take the city attorney, the controller, and the CAO to maybe we can do a quick report back on the issue.
Yeah, we need that for this fiscal year, and we'd like it in play when the fees go in play.
I think that report will actually tell us if it is logistically possible to do that by July 1st.
Okay. Well, we said 7 months or 8 months or whatever.
Yes, it would be, we would need it by September.
Yeah, it's September.
We would probably not recommend doing it in the middle of a fiscal year. That's the issue.
Okay. Well,
Okay, let me ask him now.
good. And then my final one is that we still, whenever, as quick as you can get back with us on the 21% on the citywide.
Just for the record, I'm going to put some questions in real quick, and then I got a couple of questions that I want answers to. First is the not-for-profits. You're going to flesh that all out and get that before us as a council. Obviously, not-for-profits and for-profits who build affordable housing are tremendously important to me. So be it a nonprofit or a for-profit, help me with that, and what issues will it create for them? Second one, is it a good idea to increase their fees for development that include 80% or more affordable rental units? It's the same question in a different way. If they're really going up the stream with that, I'd like to know. How will this fee increase affect, and Ms. Gruhl asked this, the city offers to developers of green buildings? I mean, are we incenting them? Are we working things out? Are we finding a strategy on green buildings? Because that is a big deal. Then I got a couple of more. What is the difference between the surcharge and the fees that are proposed? Help us understand the difference between the surcharge. You have to do it now.
Okay.
Okay. Is there any fee increase proposed by the consultant that the department does not think is a good idea to increase? Was there any? If there is, let us know that when we have that meeting. Now let me ask you an overview question. If we are down 100 people in your department, and why are we down that 100? We couldn't find people, or we couldn't fund it? What made that situation?
No, I love to explain this. At the beginning of last year, we had permission to fill 68 vacancies in the department.
Yeah.
Through the managed hiring process, we lost permission for 34, so there were 35 positions left, or right within one or two, 35 positions that we were given permission to fill the vacancies. We filled every vacancy that we had permission for. But the important thing to note is that most of the vacancies that we filled were filled with mandatory internal promotions. So the minute we filled that vacancy, we created a new vacancy underneath. And the way the managed hiring process goes, every vacancy requires a new permission. So of the 35 that we filled, about 30 of them were, these mandatory. The 5 that we filled, I think 4 of them were administrative or clerical. And so in the entire year, we got 1 new ZA. So that was the planning capacity that we got in the entire year. And in that year, we lost through attrition 5 planners. So at the beginning of last year, we had 100 vacancies, and now we have 106. We have made no progress.
Making no progress, if you had your dream come true, forget the politics around this building, and even forget the deficit we have. What kind of additional personnel would you need to adequately staff your department to process applications?
The work program that we have needs 400 people to do it. Now, I have to tell you that in the recent budget, we probably are going to lose at least half of those 100 permanently. They will be gone. And I will reduce the work program. We will come back and tell you what it is that we're not going to be able to do. But the most important thing one could do for me, if I had my druthers and you said you're dreaming, when you give me permission to, you create a new position, you tell me, Gail, I'm going to let you have a new senior planner to do this work. I would like the managed hiring process, when they give me permission to fill that vacancy, to also give me permission to fill all of the vacancies that it creates, all the way down to the new capacity, because frankly, the money you give me for the new senior planner is not one person, it's the incremental promotion of the city planner to senior, the incremental of the associate to city, all the way down until you hire the new assistant. If you're going to fill a vacancy, get the new capacity. And if you're not going to let me have the new capacity, don't let me promote somebody and then end up with all the same people, only I'm paying them more money.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you, and I also have a huge problem with your understaffing, because every person you bring on has an opportunity for multiplier effect by creating a project, getting the project done, creating jobs for people who are working on the project. And saying that, have you made any effort to get economic stimulus recovery money out of the Obama administration? Because you're a direct hit on jobs, potentially, your plan.
Yes, there are certain things that we are doing that could be eligible for that kind of stimulus money. Work that we're doing, I don't know if you're aware, but the work that we're doing on the 10 TODs, we got that money, not through the city, but we got that money from SCAG. We went after those grants and got those money, and we actually do that as much as we can. But some of the stimulus money could be available for new TODs. There's certain infrastructure. I mean, we're always worried about how are we going to reposition our old industrial lands to create the new jobs that we need. The infrastructure investments could really help that. So we are at the table, and there's not a lot of money through the stimulus for planning, but where there are opportunities, we are going for it.
So I can tell you that my plan, which is West LA right now, out of your immediate group, has been delayed. As you said, you're going to try the best you can over the next 18 to 24 months, but it isn't in the queue like it was just a couple of months ago. The West Side, my district, is a huge gold mine for developers and for community, for all of us. We love it, right? But if we can't get things happening, it becomes extremely frustrating for each of these community plans in terms of getting it right and getting it done so we can...
Yeah, the huge dilemma that everybody faces is that in the bad economic times when there is less general fund money, that is the most opportune time to do planning, because communities who are not being, I want to use the word assaulted by development from every direction, they are more open to actually creating new plans and being engaged in the planning, and it does help us prepare. And we in the planning department are really trying to prioritize the work that we're doing to make the highest priority that work that really will help us recover as quickly as possible, and to take advantage of the recovery the minute it starts to happen. And that's new plans, it's development reform.
Now, some of the big developers historically, have they done full cost recovery as they went forward with their projects?
When a development has an EIR, a full EIR, we can charge not only the full cost of the EIR, but the full cost of the project. And so a lot of the big projects that do have EIRs, we do collect the full cost recovery.
Great. When you are now in the situation, and I'm just going to borrow one phrase from Mr. Reyes, putting another nail in the coffin. Timing is obviously everything in many situations. I mean, just forget the politics again. Forget the mayor putting $6 or $7 million in your budget. I don't want to hear any of that. Is the timing right now, considering the situation? I know developers come to me, can't even secure loans, others.
Right.
It's a big issue. We're in a serious, most serious economic downcline in our history. Maybe those who were young and bright during the Great Depression are still, but I'm just talking about since that period to today. This is a huge new day.
It's very different, and I think that, interestingly, we still are getting a lot of projects that are getting processed. They may not be planning to build because they can't get financing, but there's still a lot of projects coming through our department, and we want to be as responsive as we, possibly can. So we are trying to do that.
But I'm just talking about getting the 6 or 8 million back, or 4 million, whatever we're talking about. I don't want to shoot ourselves in the foot.
Yeah. Well, I think a big step is to get closer to cost recovery for the development projects, because the general fund money really should be spent on the general fund efforts, the policy development, the community plans. That's where we need to be putting our general fund money.
I think one of the most, startling factors is that even with the fees that are being proposed, we only get to about 70%, correct?
Exactly.
So we're not even hitting the 100% recovery.
Exactly.
Colleagues, I believe I can go forward as a committee report from the Chair of Planning, Land Use and Management, and we can send this forward with the intention of having a robust discussion, and hopefully we pick a light day in council and flush out as much as we can so that we can get that reality check as to how this will impact the market and hopefully avoid that punitive effect in terms of generating the business that needs to happen here in the city. We need the jobs, we need the housing, but we also need to know where to build the housing, and we need to know how to design from an urban development point of view the best case scenarios for areas that are already feeling the pressure because of density and poverty, and the areas that are feeling the pressure because of the lack of parking and the lack of housing for those who would want to live close to where they work. So that being said, I'd just like to perhaps end my part of the committee hearing here, and with the recommendation that we move forward as a committee report, being the chair, and schedule this for council as soon as possible, and maybe correlate our tracks so that the definition of a trust or enterprise fund actually is in a parallel track with the policy here, and hopefully get this implemented as soon as we can, so that we can get close to that amount that was identified. I'm not sure how close we'll get, but depending on, as policymakers, where we want to take it, I think we'll find out after that council meeting.
And I think, I don't know, and maybe it's best to come from you and Mr. Parks, is to send this out to all the council members immediately and ask them to review and look at it before Tuesday, that we're going to have a contextual conversation about it, so that, and we really don't, want anyone to say, I just got it today and I haven't had time to review it. And
well, as chair of this committee, I'll send a cover letter to each one of my colleagues with the body of the report, and perhaps if I can get from the clerk the questions that have already been put forth by the committee members here, have that attached so that the other council members know what's being asked, and if there's anything else they need to put on the table, it'll give the planning department a chance to review them before you get to the council meeting, we would hope, so that way you're well prepared and have a sense of direction of where this discussion can go.
What would be also helpful on the grid, that you put down the district.
Okay.
It'll help people figure out what's going on in their particular district.
Well, they'll probably have a percentage of each area. I mean, everyone has residential, everyone has commercial. I think everyone gets impacted by this, Councilmember.
Yeah.
But the more a council member understands their district and its direct impact, I think the more appreciative they'll be of what we're showing.
Yeah.
Just if it's not too much.
We'll try. We'll look and see if that data is available easily to put in that format.
Is it possible to look at, in your records, the propensity of certain activities that are more dominant in one district than the other?
We certainly have the numbers, the total number of each case, each type of case. So that could be helpful. Yeah, okay.
Okay.
I don't specifically remember the data being separated by a district or by area of the city.
Yeah.
We just
we'll
do an overlay.
We could take a look.
Figure it out.
Council members, we can do it. We have a case tracking system. It's not 100%, but we're pretty close in
It'll give us a
identifying
ballpark.
every council district.
I think it would be helpful, you've seen kind of where we're asking the questions.
Yes.
So if, for example, you said, all right, the operating agreement, the one that, which is for huge projects, this is the kind of project that would be focused on. So if they know it is a multi-million dollar, project, the increase from that isn't seen as substantial. But, so I think if you can pick certain categories that you've seen us highlight today and show an example, i.e., just Century City or Universal or wherever the big projects, these are the kind of projects that would be impacted by that versus some others. So some people have almost case studies of 4 or 5 that would be impacted by this.
Okay, well, With that, I believe my directive is pretty clear, and with that, I can withdraw myself from this role.
Oh, you can stay?
This dignified Budget and Finance Committee will remains.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Reyes and Ms. Gruhl, I have one question.
Yes.
For the committee report, the recommendation going forward, would it be
No.
to
No,
approve?
no, I think it's no recommendation. Just a communication from the committees. Plus, we also don't have quorum at the moment, so, thank you.
Thanks, Ed.
Thank you, Ed. So,
Closed session.
closed session.
We've addressed all the open
Session items. Okay. So we're going to go into closed session. We're going to stay here.
Adjourn.
We will
So adjourn the special.
Adjourn the meeting.
adjourn the special meeting. Thank you.
And resume.
We'll resume the regular meeting. So Dion, wherever Dion is.
How good you are. Keep it.
Dion, you want to tell who can stay and who needs to go? Sure. On which item we're going to start with?
We'll just go in order then. Item number 2, first one.
Well, that's the big, bold issue. Yeah, we remind bold print. Okay. And then obviously in bold print, 4/9,
Okay, item,
2 days a week.
just for the record, item number 2 is a report relative to a proposed offer and compromise by Vonage America.
That's the big story. And then bold, the phone number to call and the web page to go to figure it out.